During the 2016 campaign, President-elect Trump called President Obama the worst president in U.S. history. And while President Obama called his successor temperamentally unfit to be the commander-in-chief.
But in about an hour and a half, the two will meet at the White House and begin the time-honored transition process. Here you see the president-elect's plane at LaGuardia Airport set to take off for Washington, D.C. You know, I've actually been in that plane, Anne-Marie.
Really?
Yeah, I got to interview President-elect Trump right before he announced his candidacy for the presidency in that plane. And
he's about to get an upgrade on the plane, I think.
I don't know. That plane is sick.
Really?
It's really cool.
John Dickerson is CBS News political director and moderator of Face the Nation. John, we are going to witness a very interesting meeting today. The president is hosting the president-elect at the White House. What typically takes place during this sort of meeting?
Well, it's very cordial. There's a lot of ceremonial coming together. The campaign is behind us. We're all one nation. It's a peaceful transfer of power. So it's symbolically, it's beginning to heal the wounds of the election. In person, I'm not sure what will happen at the first meeting. There are a number of these conversations between a president and president-elect in which the president-elect is gradually brought into the most sensitive parts of the job. George W. Bush gave advice, little pieces of advice to Barack Obama that became more powerful as Obama carried him through office. One of the pieces of advice was use a lot of hand sanitizer, actually. So there's news you can use. I don't know whether that'll happen in this meeting. I think in this case it'll probably be just kind of getting over the fact that, Donald Trump spent 5 years saying Barack Obama wasn't born in America and wasn't a legitimate president. Yeah. So just getting through a meeting in which they just have nice pleasantries is probably a good place to start.
John, on that last point about the rise of Donald Trump, Paul Ryan yesterday said that Donald Trump heard a voice that nobody else heard. But there seem to be two narratives about the rise of Trump. One is the disaffected, those folks who feel left behind by Washington, by both parties. But there's another narrative here, which is that he did come to prominence with birtherism, with immigrant bashing, religious bigotry, the embracement of white identity politics. Is it fair to disengage one from the other when you talk about the rise of Trump and Trumpism, or do you have to bundle them all together?
Well, there are a number of different streams that led to his rise. So I think you have to be honest about what happened and who a portion of his supporters are. I think it's a mistake to take a portion of his supporters and make that the entire group. I think it's also, we have to be careful about people saying, Donald Trump's to people talking about mandates or talking about the message from the election. And if you're purely looking at a mandate, you would look at which candidate got the most human beings to vote for them. Well, if you're doing that, then you're talking about Hillary Clinton. Right. So we just need to be smart about reading what's in the electorate and reading what the results are. And one of the challenges for Donald Trump will be he pulled off an extraordinary political feat, which is getting people to vote for him. But now he has to represent an entire country. So to the extent that a portion of his electorate elevated him to the White House, he now has to figure out how to govern an entire country.
I'm glad you brought up Paul Ryan in his speech yesterday, which was somewhat complimentary, but we know that these two have had a history, an awkward history together, and they're going to be meeting. Any common ground, do you think, that where they can start a conversation?
Oh, sure. Paul Ryan, he was incredibly complimentary. I mean, it's now Donald Trump's signature that allows all the things that Paul Ryan has wanted to do for years to become law. So he's his best pal now. And it's sort of amusing to hear Paul Ryan talk about the voice that Donald Trump heard. The voice that Donald Trump heard has been calling for Paul Ryan's head. So, and I think also it's a little, Paul Ryan knows that voice. Paul Ryan, like many people do, understands the challenges that working class Americans have gone through. What Donald Trump did that was so politically effective was not only that he heard the voice, but that those people heard themselves in him, that he spoke for them. That's the ticket. Yeah. And that's important for all lawmakers. I think there's a mistake that people make when they say anybody other than Donald Trump didn't hear these voices, didn't know these people exist. Of course people did. Of course, I mean, in both parties, they worried about these voters. They've spent their lives trying to help these voters, but that doesn't mean they were effective. Donald Trump was quite effective in speaking to and again for those people who feel like they've been betrayed, they've been left out of the conversation, that they always get the short end of the stick, that the elites get to work things out in a way that always lets them work out fine, but that hurts other people. I mean, so that sentiment has been in the country, and Donald Trump was the one who was best able to commune with it. But it's a little, it's imprecise, and it's going to be ineffective if people think that, well, he was the only one who heard this voice.
Well, so to that end, Democrats in the House and the Senate issued statements that they want to work with the president-elect on areas that they might agree in: working families, infrastructure, family leave. Donald Trump himself on the campaign trail likened his movement to that of Bernie Sanders. So could we see even some very liberal lawmakers finding some commonality with the president-elect, because Trump has said, look, these folks are not just Republicans, they're probably some Democrats too.
Sure, absolutely. And you can add in the 42 million or so poor in America that Donald Trump didn't necessarily campaign to or with, but that are just as shut out of the American system of rewards and opportunity that the people who are more a part of his constituency and the sort of the rural non-college worker. So absolutely. Now that's a challenge for Donald Trump. If in fact he's going to talk to those whose voices have not been heard, who don't have a voice in the corridors of power, then he's got a huge group of Americans who would also fit that profile. And we'll see whether that's in fact his goal, or whether he just takes care of the people who voted for him.
What about the future of the Democratic Party? Who is the face of the Democratic Party moving forward now?
Excellent question.
Do they have a bench?
Well, they have a bench. They have some stars within the party. I mean, certainly Elizabeth Warren, certainly Bernie Sanders. There will be an interesting conversation in the Democratic Party. Donald Trump decided, I'm going to run the way I want to run, and all the smart, elite, fancy strategists in the party are all wrong. And a lot of people snickered, and then he went and won an election. And so there will be a lot of Democrats who say, you know, we're going to finally run as populists in this party. We're going to run more like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, and not like the sort of triangulating, third way, corporate connected Democratic Party. So there's going to be a real conversation in the Democratic Party. And the question is, who represents what wings? We know about Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. Certainly Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, is going to have a really interesting job. He likes to get deals done. Donald Trump likes to get deals done. They are from roughly the same neck of the woods. And that'll be a really interesting relationship to watch. That's a get business done relationship, not so much a lead the new generation of Democrats job. And that question is, that's still a post that's yet to be filled by a Democrat out there.
John, because you're a walking history book, you talked about the advice that President Bush gave.
On very little sleep, so don't make it hard.
No, so I love the advice that I'm told that Ronald Reagan gave to President Bill Clinton, which is learn how to properly salute. Apparently, Bill Clinton was, he was sort of very lackadaisical about saluting, and Reagan was always a Christian. We're on the eve of Veterans Day. Was that a true story?
I don't know that I've heard that. There was there was an apocryphal version of that was used to make Bill Clinton, to kind of run him down. The idea that he didn't care enough about the military to learn how to salute. So, but it could actually. I haven't heard that story. I'm not challenging it, but I also know that there was this kind of this idea that Bill Clinton didn't care enough to learn how to. So, but that's a really important job for the president, because if you every time you see Barack Obama get on the plane or the helicopter, he has a crisp salute. Yeah. So, among the things Donald Trump will have to learn
is how to do that.
Although he did go to military school, so
that's right. Valley Forge.
He probably knows how to give a crisp salute. Yeah. So
we'll see. We'll find out
one item off the to-do list.
John Dickerson, appreciate it as always. Thank you, sir.